The forge burned low, not from neglect, but because Elias Thorne hadn't lit it again. He sat across the room, massive hands resting on his knees, watching her. Not with suspicion, not even curiosity, just a stillness that came from a man used to long silences and slow-burning decisions. Calla Henley sat where he'd left her, in a worn chair near the heat-stained wall. Blanket pulled up to her chin, eyes flicking like the flamelight toward every sound. The corners of her mouth twitched when the wind brushed the door. She flinched when the coals popped. Her legs, tucked under her like a colt not yet steady on its feet, trembled beneath the folds of fabric. The bread he'd given her lay untouched on the small table between them. "Ain't poisoned," Elias said eventually. She looked at him. Not startled exactly, just wary. "I didn't say it was." "You're staring like it bit you." Calla's voice came out soft. "Food don't come without a price." Elias leaned back in his chair, the old wood groaning beneath his frame. "That what they taught you out there?" She said nothing. Her gaze dropped to the bread again. He let the quiet stretch. He was good at that, better than most. The forge had taught him patience, the way steel only bent when it was ready, not when you told it to. Finally she tore a piece from the edge and bit into it. It broke like a stone in her mouth, dry, plain, but it was food. She chewed slow, thoughtful, watching him now, as if wondering why he wasn't asking questions. She was used to being prodded. Elias realized that used to being a thing, not a person. "I don't need a story," he said after a moment. Calla froze. "What?" Sod, I don't need a story," she swallowed. "Everyone wants a story. Not me." Calla tilted her head, chin lifting slightly. Her dirt-smeared cheekbones caught the firelight. "Then why bring me in?" Elias stood, walked to the forge, picked up a poker, and stirred the coals with practiced ease. The embers flared orange, licking the air like tongues tasting the cold. "Because I saw someone freezing outside my wall." Calla didn't respond. She pulled the blanket tighter. Elias didn't speak either. He worked in silence, prepping for the next morning. The forge would need to burn hot by dawn. Horseshoes didn't shape themselves. Calla finally broke the silence. "I'll be gone by morning. Didn't say you had to be." She blinked. "I don't want charity. Wasn't offering it." "Then what is this?" Elias set the poker down, turned, folded his arms. "This is a warm place to sleep. That's all. No strings. No questions. You want to stay another night, fine. You want to leave, that's your road. I don't chain guests to the anvil. Guests." She laughed, but there was no mirth in it. "That what I am?" he shrugged. "If you want to be." The silence returned, but it was different now. Less sharp doubt when he turned back to the fire. He heard her chewing again. The next morning, she was gone. Elias found the blanket folded on the chair. The crust of bread missing. His gut told him she wouldn't be back, but he was wrong. She came back the next night. Didn't say anything. Just stood in the doorway until he looked up. Then she walked to the same chair, sat down, and ate the food. He laid out. No words passed between them that night. Nor the next. But by the fourth night, she spoke. "You don't sleep." He didn't look up from the gear he was mending. "I do. Not when I'm here." He glanced at her. "Maybe I just don't trust you." Her lips curled slightly. "I believe that." Then softer, "You should." He didn't reply. She didn't elaborate. Whispering Hollow was a quiet town. Not dead, not lively. Just quiet. A place people came to disappear or die. Elias had done both, in a way. The townsfolk left him alone. They respected what he did, needed it, but no one tried to sit at his table. No one invited him to socials or church picnics. He was the blacksmith, the hammer man, the broad-shouldered brute who never smiled. That suited him fine, until the girl in the hole arrived. Now people talked. He heard it behind the counter at Dunn's Mercantile. Saw the glances when he walked past the sheriff's office. Even the preacher's wife gave him a lingering look last Sunday. They wondered who she was, why she stayed, what he wanted from her. Calla, for her part, didn't go into town. She stayed close to the smithy. Sometimes she fetched water from the pump out back. Sometimes she cleaned the soot-caked windows or swept without being asked. She never smiled, never laughed, but she didn't flinch as much anymore. Elias caught her watching the forge one night. The way the metal glowed, bending to his will. "You want to learn?" She blinked. "What?" "The forge, the tools. Why would you teach me?" "Because you look at the fire like it answers questions." She looked away. He waited. Then she said, "All right." She had steady hands, a few burns, a lot of blisters, but steady. Elias taught her the basics. How to hold the tongs, how to work the bellows, how steel sings when it's ready. She learned fast, asked sharp questions, listened better than most men he'd ever hired. "Where'd you learn to listen like that?" he asked one night. She paused, hammer raised. "From people who stopped talking." And then she went back to work. Winter thickened. The forge burned longer, and still she stayed. One night, Elias came back from the general store to find her repairing the horseshoe rack. "Noticed it was splintered," she said. "Figured you hadn't gotten to it yet." He didn't answer. Just stood there, watching. Something passed between them then. Not affection, not comfort. Something quieter. Something rooted. That night, he laid out 2 plates instead of 1. She didn't comment. She just sat. And ate. Trouble arrived 3 days later. Riders. 3 of them. Not locals. Elias could tell by the coats, the dust, the arrogance in their spurs. They came into town loud, laughing. One of them, a tall man with a scar down his jaws, stopped outside Dunn's and asked where he might find a man named Elias. Thorn, the townsfolk pointed, of course. Whispering Hollow was small. The 3 rode straight to the forge. Calla was outside, splitting wood. She saw them first. Her whole body stilled. Then she dropped the axe and ran inside. Elias, he was already standing, hand on the poker. Riders. He moved to the window, glanced once, and froze. Calla saw it. The way his face changed. Not fear, not surprise. Something harder. Recognition. Double quotes. "You know them." He nodded once. "They know. You, enough to hate me." The door slammed open. And the pest walked in. The first man through the door filled the room like a storm. He wasn't loud, but something about his presence cracked the silence open like thunder. Scarred jaw, long coat, eyes the color of split iron. He swept the room once, slow and precise, like a man deciding where the violence would begin. Elias didn't move, neither did Calla. The second man followed. Leaner, twitchy hands never still, eyes never focused. He paced behind the first like a dog bred for fights it never quite won. The third was quietest of all, didn't speak, didn't twitch, just stood in the doorway, face half shadowed by the rim of his hat. The kind of quiet that wasn't peace. The kind that watched for the moment a knife should go in. Scarjaw grinned. The kind of grin made of knives. "Well, you've gotten soft." Elias didn't blink. "Didn't expect you to come calling, Ridge. You left me a lot of things, Thorn. Expectation wasn't one of them." The man Ridge stepped further into the forge, boots echoing off the stone. He ran a finger along the edge of the work table, glanced at the tools, the organized rows of tongs, chisels, and horse nails. Then his gaze landed on Calla. "You don't introduce your guests? She's not yours to ask about." Ridge's eyes glinted. "That sounds a lot like possession, not protection." Calla didn't flinch. She stood behind the anvil, posture guarded, shoulders squared. If she was afraid, she buried it deep. Elias stepped forward, slow, hands empty. "What do you want?" "Just catching up with old friends. You never had friends." "You had leverage." Ridge's smile thinned. "Still sharp with words, I see. Is the steel still sharp, too?" The quiet. Man at the door chuckled once. It wasn't a good sound. The twitchy one started moving again. Circling, picking up tools, testing their weight, trying not to look like he was casing the place. Elias didn't stop him. Yet. Ridge moved to the forge. The coals were low, but still. Red in the center. He grabbed a poker, turned a piece of iron lazily. "This place suits you," he said. Quiet, simple, pretending like blood don't cling to your boots. "You almost had me fooled. I didn't ask to be found." "That's the thing about old sins," Ridge said. "They don't care what you ask." He turned the iron again, then plunged the poker deeper until sparks scattered upward. "You ran. Thought you could change. Thought disappearing into a blacksmith's apron would make you someone new." Elias said nothing, but the world remembers. "I remember. That last night at Briar Hollow, you remember that?" "I remember the bodies. So do I. You lit the fire. You lit the fuse. I just gave it breath." Kala's eyes flicked between them. Elias hadn't told her anything. He hadn't needed to. His scars did the talking. But now something new glimmered in Ridge's voice. History. Personal. "I'm not here to make you feel guilty," Ridge said, tossing the poker onto the stone. "I'm here for something simpler." Elias raised an eyebrow. "I want your hands." Kala blinked. Elias didn't. "You always were the best," Ridge continued. "Those hands shaped more than iron. They built things, broke things. You know what I need now." "Let me guess," Elias murmured. "A coffin?" Ridge laughed. So did the twitchy one, but the quiet man by the door didn't smile. "No, I need a man who can shape steel into silence." Kala frowned. "What does that mean?" Elias didn't answer. Ridge did. "It means we have a job. A message to deliver. A sheriff up north who got too brave. Thought he could stand up to us. We need a demonstration." He turned back to Elias. "We need iron, spikes, branding, something special. And I need the hands that made the whisper blades." At Sandridge, Kala's breath hitched. Elias went still. "That was a lifetime ago." "It was 5 years. I burned those molds." "You can remake them." "No," Ridge smiled wider. "You still think no matters." "That's adorable." He gestured to the quiet man. The door closed behind them. The twitchy one stopped fidgeting. "We're not asking, we're taking. Either you make what we need, or we make the town regret protecting you." Kala moved then. Not far. Just a shift. But Elias saw it. So did Ridge. "Ah," he said. "So she does matter. You don't touch her." "Or what?" Ridge leaned forward. "You'll hammer me flat? You'll wake the old name everyone feared? The man who walked into a bar in Red Claw and left only smoke behind?" Elias's voice dropped to gravel. "You'd better pray I don't." The silence was thick, heavy. Then the quiet man finally stepped forward, slow, calculated. He set a pouch on the workbench. Gold. Heavy enough to mean things. "This is the down payment," Ridge said. "Deliver the rest by the full moon, or we burn it all. Her included." They turned as one and walked out. Kala spoke first. "What the hell was that?" Elias didn't answer. He picked up the pouch, threw it into the furnace. The gold melted. Fast, she stared at him. "You're not going to ask for help?" "No." "Why?" "Because I've seen what comes when you ask." She grabbed his arm. "You can't fight them alone." Elias met her eyes. "I've done worse. You're not that man anymore." His jaw clenched. "Exactly." Kala shook her head. "You can't just let them walk in here and threaten. I'm not letting them do anything. I'm giving them time to choke on their own confidence." Her fingers dropped. "You have a plan." "I have a forge. And I'm going to make something old." Kala swallowed. "The whisper blades?" "No," Elias said. "Something worse." He didn't sleep for the next 2 days. Didn't eat much either. He worked, hammered, poured, shaped. Calla stayed close. She didn't ask questions. She just stoked the fire when it dipped. Passed tools when he reached, whatever he was making. It needed heat, more than usual. And time. On the third night, he handed her a folded piece of parchment. If I'm not back by the end of the week, give this to Sheriff Tallon. She didn't take it. What is it? A list. Of names. Places, proof. Why not take it to the sheriff now? Because the law only acts when the blood is fresh, not when it's still warm. She finally took the note, tucked it into her coat, and then she asked what she hadn't dared to ask since the men left. Who? Were you before this? Elias stopped. He looked at her, and he said, a weapon someone else held. She didn't reply, didn't need to. They both knew what it meant. Ridge returned on the fourth day, didn't knock, didn't ask. He walked into the forge with the same confidence as before. But this time, he didn't leave, because Elias was waiting, and the fire wasn't the only thing burning. The forge wasn't quiet when Ridge came back. It was humming, not with fire. With intent. The air inside was thick with heat and something else, something old. Smoke curled against the rafters. Shadows moved like they were part of the walls. And the stone floor trembled faintly beneath Ridge's boots as he stepped in. Elias stood in the center of it all. Not at the anvil, not at the bellows, but beside a heavy work table near the back, a slab of iron resting on it, run through with grooves. Too precise to be accidental. He didn't look up. You're early, Elias said. You're alone, Ridge answered. His voice wasn't mocking this time. It was cautious. Elias turned. He wore a leather apron blackened with soot. His face glistened with sweat. His eyes, usually the quiet color of ash, burned like embers. You came back with how many? Ridge smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just us three again. Didn't think you'd need convincing. Convincing who? You, Ridge said, but his tone hesitated, because behind Elias, something gleamed. Rows of steel lined the back wall now. Not blades. Not horseshoes. Something else. New. Unfamiliar. The twitchy one shifted. What's that? Elias wiped his brow. Picked up a pair of thick gloves. You ever hear of a whisper trap? The quiet one tensed. Ridge narrowed his eyes. Old contraption. Illegal in every territory. That's the one. Calla stepped out from the shadows then, and she wasn't alone. Behind her, Sheriff Tallon walked in. 6 deputies followed, guns drawn, and for the first time, Ridge understood. He hadn't walked into a forge. He'd walked into a cage. The trap didn't snap like a firewa. Bear trap. It didn't need to. It just closed. Steel shutters fell over the windows. The door clanged shut behind them. A sliding bolt locked into place from the outside, where 2 more men stood guard. Ridge's eyes darted, and the twitchy one reached for his gun too slow. Tallon's deputies moved in with practiced precision. Quiet Man had a knife in his sleeve. Calla already had it in her hand. Blood splashed across the floor. The man groaned. Not dead. Just done. How long? Ridge said, still trying to sound calm, but his voice trembled. How long have you been planning? This? Elias didn't smile. Since I saw your shadow in the smoke. Tallon nodded toward Calla. She came to me the day after your first visit. Gave me the note, the list, the names, Ridge sneered. You used her. Calla stepped forward. No, I chose. Ridge turned to Elias. And you think this changes anything? You think locking me in here ends the blood? Elias pulled a lever. The walls hummed. With noise. With tension, from every rafter and beam, strange shapes unfolded. Not weapons. Warnings. Double quotes. No, Elias said. But it stops it from starting again. Tallon motioned to his deputies. Cuff them. All 3. We'll see what the judge thinks of your brand of persuasion. The twitchy one was crying. The quiet one said, nothing, just bled. Ridge didn't fight. He looked around the forge one last time. Then he looked at Elias. You could have killed us. Elias nodded. I know. Why didn't you? Kala answered. Because he's not a weapon anymore. Elias said nothing. He didn't have to. The cuffs clicked and the forge cooled. It took half a day to clean the blood. Kala didn't speak much. Neither did Elias. But the silence between them wasn't heavy now. It was earned. That evening, the forge opened again. A boy came in, maybe 10, carrying a bent gate latch. Pa says this hinge won't shut no more. Elias bent down, took the piece, turned it in his hand. Tell your pa I'll bring it by tomorrow. The boy nodded. He lingered a moment, eyes darting toward Kala. You gonna teach her blacksmithing too? Elias looked over. Kala had soot on her arms, grease on her cheek, and something in her eyes that hadn't been there weeks ago. Fire. She's already teaching me, Elias said. The boy grinned. Ran off. Elias watched him go. Then he looked at Kala. She was watching the coals. The forge burned low again, but it was enough. And this time, when the wind howled outside, neither of them flinched. There were fewer eyes on them now. People in Whispering Hollow had a way of forgetting things once the noise passed. They didn't forget that Elias Thorne had once made tools that doubled as instruments of silence, or that a girl who used to sleep in a hole behind his forge now walked beside him like she belonged there. But they pretended to, because forgetting was safer, cleaner, especially when peace started to settle like morning frost. But Kala didn't forget. Not the heat. Not the sound of Ridge's voice. Not the moment she pulled a blade from a man's wrist before he could bury it in the sheriff. She felt it in her bones every time the forge went quiet. Elias knew. He saw it when her eyes followed the door, even after it closed, as if expecting it to open again. He saw it when she walked home from the pump, always glancing back once, twice, just in case. So he taught her more, not just how to forge, but how to read people, steel, the town. How pressure built before it hissed. How violence always wore a face long before it raised a hand. Sheriff Tollin came by less now, not out of neglect, but trust. You built something good here, he said one morning, tipping his hat as he stood just outside the forge. I figure it can stand without me peering in. Elias only nodded. Tll and glanced past him to where Kala was sorting nails into jars. She's different. So am I. The sheriff studied him. Fair enough. He left without saying more. That night, the wind returned. Not harsh, just sharp enough to whistle through the shutters. Elias found her standing by the window. They're not coming back, he said. Kala didn't look away from the dark. How do you know? Because they came for a weapon and left with the weight of a name. She turned to him. You think a name scares men like that? No, he said. But truth does. She folded her arms. Then what scares you? He didn't answer right away. He walked to the forge, stirred the coals with a long iron poker. The glow returned, painting both their faces in flickering gold. Then he said, losing who I became to who I used to be. Kala leaned against the work table. Her voice dropped. That's what scares me too. Spring came late to Whispering Hollow. The snows held on longer than usual, and the river swelled with meltwater, drowning half the northern trails. With the thaw came travelers. Most passed through, but one stayed. She was older than Kala, younger than Elias, carried herself like someone used to sleeping with her back to a wall. Her coat was worn, boots cracked, hair tucked up beneath a man's hat. She came into the forge just after dusk and asked for work. Elias studied her for a moment, then handed her a horseshoe, shaped that, cold. She didn't flinch, took the steel, didn't speak, just walked to the anvil. Her hammer swings were too shallow, her grip wrong, but her jaw was set like iron. Elias waited, let her struggle, then walked over and corrected her grip. You got the will, need the rhythm. She looked up. A long silence stretched between them. Then she said, You Elias Thorne? Depends who's asking. Name's Marrow, just Marrow. Elias nodded once. Then yeah, that's me. Marrow stayed in the loft. She didn't ask for a room, didn't ask for charity. Calla didn't trust her. Something about the way she talks. Calla said that night, she doesn't talk. Exactly, Elias shrugged. People with pasts walk quiet, or hide knives, he smiled faintly. Same thing. Still, he watched Marrow too. Not with suspicion, with familiarity. She moved like he used to. Slept light. Checked the window before eating. Hammered to distract herself, not to build. But she learned fast. Within 2 weeks, she could shape a straight bar faster than Calla. Within a month, she could temper it without burning the edge. You planning to stay? Elias asked one night. Marrow didn't look up from the forge. Don't know yet. Someone chasing you? She glanced sideways. Aren't they always? Eli nodded. He didn't press. The silence didn't last. 3 weeks later, a man came to town. Clean boots, long coat. Badge that wasn't silver, but gold. Marshal's authority. Federal. He didn't come to the forge. He went straight to Sheriff Tickle Len. And the next day, Tallin came to Elias. Marshal Ketter wants a word. Elias wiped his hands on a cloth. About what? Didn't say. Then I'm not walking in blind. Tallin sighed. Then let him come to you. He won't. He wants the show of it. Calla stepped from the shadows. Then, give him one. Elias walked to the station house just before noon. Marrow and Calla watched from the porch of the forge. He didn't wear a gun. Didn't carry his hammer. Just his hands. The sun caught the edge of the marshal's badge as he stepped out to greet him. Ketter was tall, trim, clean-shaven, a man used to command. Elias Thorne, Marshal. I'm here on federal interest. Whose? Mine. They stared at each other. You know a woman by the name of Marin Wade? Elias blinked. Not for 20 years. She's dead. I figured. She had a daughter. Elias waited. Ketter sighed. Girl's missing. And you're the last man who shared blood with her. Elias felt the floor tilt. Calla. The sound in Elias Thorne's ears wasn't wind. It was blood. It roared, not in panic, but in weight. A weight he thought he'd buried long ago beneath ash, beneath steel, beneath silence. Marin Wade. He hadn't spoken that name in 2 decades. And yet, the syllables still burned on his tongue like a memory he'd never learned to spit out. Ketter said the girl was missing, but Elias was already calculating the time. Distance, possibility, danger. You knew her, Ketter said again, voice like a file against iron. A long time ago. Long's a funny word. When blood's involved, it runs close, not far. Elias didn't correct him. He was too busy seeing ghosts. Calla was waiting. When he came back, she didn't ask. She didn't have to. He sat on the porch steps. The forge behind them hissed softly, the way it always did when the fire was banked. But not asleep. Marrow leaned against the far post. Her arms crossed. Her hat low. 3 of them, and not a word spoken. Until Elias said, she was 17 when she left. Calla turned to him. The girl? Her mother, Marin. He shook his head. No. One could tell her nothing. She lit her own trail and walked it without ever looking back. Thought love made you reckless. Thought being in love made you bulletproof. It doesn't, Calla said. I know that now. Marrow said nothing, but Elias felt her shift. He looked at her. You ever hear the name Wade? She nodded. Once. Why? Because someone asked me once, same way the marshal just did. I told them I didn't know the name. Then I changed towns. That recent? Marrow met his gaze. 3 months, Elias exhaled. Damn, what's going on? Calla asked. He told them. The whole thing, not just about Marin, but about the years after, the jobs, the blood, the safe houses, the whispers. The one letter he got before she disappeared, Marrow, was the first to speak after. You think this missing girl might be ... yours? Elias looked away. No, she would have told me. Unless she didn't know. That thought stuck deeper than it should have. Calla didn't speak. She just wrapped her arms tighter around herself. Keter came back the next morning. Calla opened the door. He's working. He can stop. No, he can't. Keter tilted his head. You speak for him now? He's earned it. Keter stared at her a moment, then stepped back. Tell him I'll be waiting at the station. Sundown. I've got things he'll want to see. He brought them a box, plain wood. Rough mailed. Inside, a journal, a broken necklace, a blood-stained kerchief, and a map. Elias picked up the necklace first, thumbed the edge. The chain was cracked, the pendant bent. Marin's. We found it at the scene, Keter said. Abandoned outpost east of Red Hollow. Looked like it had been hit by scavengers, but something about the burn pattern was ... different. Targeted. Elias flipped through the journal. The writing was sharp, angry, hopeful in some places. Names appeared: Gentry, Olin, Vera, Tullen. Stopped on one Del, he asked. Keter nodded. Short for Delilah. Girl went by that name when she checked into a post station 4 weeks ago. Used Marin's last name. Elias stared at the word until it blurred. Calla looked over his shoulder. You think she was really your daughter? I don't know. Marrow leaned in. But you're going after her. It wasn't a question. Elias closed the journal. Yeah, Keter said. I have to leave by morning. Orders. But I'm leaving this here. Take what you need. But understand. No. Elias cut him off. You understand. I'm not doing this for the law. Keter didn't blink. Didn't think you were. He left the map, the journal, the blood-stained cloth, and he didn't look back. They packed light. Elias wouldn't let Calla come back, so she packed him food anyway. A knife, a new fire striker, a bundle of coals wrapped in old linen. Marrow stood by the forge, saddlebags already tied to her horse. You sure? He asked. No, she said, but I'm going. He looked to Calla. She didn't cry, but her voice cracked. You come back different. I'll reforge you myself. He hugged her. Quick, fierce. Keep the forge hot, always. They rode out just past sunrise. The wind followed them. It took 4 days to reach Red Hollow. Marrow didn't speak much, but she watched. Eyes scanning tree lines. Watching the road behind them. Listening to the night. Elias knew the signs. He was doing the same. They reached the outpost. Just after dark. Nothing but bones left. Charred beams. A wheel half melted. Black scorch across stone. But the map said this was where Del had last been. Marrow. Crouched beside a patch of earth near the well. 2 riders. Came fast. One had a limp, boot drag. Other left clean tracks. How recent? Day. Maybe 2. Elias crouched beside her. Found a scrap of fabric. Blue. Faded. Same as the kerchief, he said. They followed the tracks, headed north, toward the canyon pass. They weren't alone. 2 nights later, camped near a dry creek bed. Elias heard it, the shift, boots on stone. Marrow heard it too. They moved without sound. When the strangers stepped into the circle of firelight, he looked more tired than dangerous. Until Elias saw the rifle and the ring on his hand. Where's the girl? The man asked. Elias didn't answer. Marrow drew. The man didn't flinch. He just said, if she's yours, she's ours now. And then the bullets flew. The first bullet missed. The second didn't. It clipped Elias across the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He dropped low, rolling behind the outcrop just as Marrow returned fire. The stranger with the ring left, disappearing into the night. His footsteps didn't scatter like panic. They paced with purpose, which meant he wasn't alone. Elias pressed his koftunf hand to the bleeding groove along his arm and hissed through his teeth. Marrow dropped beside him behind the boulder, crouching. Like a panther. 3, she said. He was scouting, Elias grunted, or bait. Let's not find out which. She nodded. They moved as one. Down the creek bed, silent, crouched, weaving through brush and stone. The moon offered half light, but they didn't need it. They read the terrain the way Smith's red flame. Behind them, a single shot echoed. A signal. They froze. He wasn't alone, Merrill whispered. A second shot answered from higher ground. Elias turned toward it, crouched behind a crooked log. Pulled his knife. He'd left his gun back at the campfire. Merrill handed him hers without asking. Then disappeared. The first man came down from the ridge like a wolf. Fast, confident, rifle ready. Elias let him pass. Waited for the second. When the next foot crunched dry twigs, Elias turned, swept the man off his feet, grabbed the rifle, swung it hard. The man crumpled. Bootsteps. He whirled, but it was Merrill. One left, she whispered. The ring. Elias nodded. They moved fast, up the ridge, around the bend, and then he saw him standing calmly, hands folded, watching the stars. Took you long enough, he said. You're outnumbered, Elias replied. The man smiled. Only if you think numbers matter. Merrill raised her rifle. Where's the girl? He looked at her. Which one? Something shifted in Elias then. Something old. Cold. You followed us. Why? Because I owed Ridge a favor, the man said. And because she's not just anyone. Who is she? The fire that burns through whatever's left. He reached into his coat. Merrill fired. Too late. A flare exploded in the sky, green and gold. A signal. Elias cursed. He brought more. Merrill kicked the man over. Check for movement. Dead. They turned to the flare. Another answered it. West. Then another. South. By morning, they were gone. So was their camp, and so were the bodies. They cleaned it, Merrill said, voice tight. Which means they wanted us alive, or distracted. Elias pulled out the map. Crossed out the outpost. We follow the flares. 3 more days. The desert turned to dry hills. Hills turned to forest. Forest opened into high plains. Tracks grew harder to follow. But then they found the wagon. Burned. Tipped over. Axle snapped. Wheel missing. Blood in the dust. Elias crouched. 2 were hurt. 1 kept running. Merrill found a boot print. Small, young, not more than 17. Could be her. Delilah, Elias said, tasting the name again. Could also be bait. He nodded. But they followed anyway. The trail led to a ravine, narrow, sharp-edged, the kind that funneled travelers into one path. No cover, no deviation. Ambush, Merrill muttered. Elias shook his head. Look again, she did. Then frowned. The rock walls had scorch marks, and a pattern. Merrill narrowed her eyes. This isn't an ambush site. It's a defense line. Someone made a stand here. Elias ran his fingers over the blackened stone. Too many char marks, repeating arcs. Someone set fires here. Controlled burns. They knew what they were doing. He stood. She was here, and she survived. Merrill looked up the far side of the ravine. Then let's see where she went. At the top of the ridge, they found the tree. It was dead. Old. Hollowed in the trunk, like something had struck it from the inside. Inside, they found a piece of cloth. Red. With a mark burned into it. A ring of thorns. Elias stared at it. Merrill said, You know that symbol? He nodded. It's older than Ridge, older than me. She waited. The hollow band. She blinked. That's a myth. No, it's real. It used to be mine. The hollow band. The name hung in the air like smoke too thick to breathe. Merrill stared at Elias, eyes narrowing beneath her brim. You were part of them. It wasn't a question. Elias didn't answer right away. He walked to the tree, crouched near the burned cloth, touched the edge of the sigil, a ring of thorns, etched with fire and fury. I started them. Merrill let out a slow breath. Thought they were just ghost stories, men who vanished. Warnings whispered around cold fires. Elias stood. We weren't ghosts. We were real. And worse, Marrow paced a step back. Her boot stirred. Loose dirt. So this girl Dell, she found the old tree, left the mark, and kept moving. Why? To warn someone. Or to bait someone. You think she knows who she is? Elias looked up at the dead tree, at the ring of thorns carved into its trunk. Half melted from inside. I think she knows exactly who she is. They camped near a dry spring that night, 1/2 mile from the ridge. Elias didn't sleep. Marrow sharpened her knife beside the fire. Neither spoke for a long time. Then, finally, why'd you leave them? Marrow didn't look up. The hollow band. Why'd you walk away? Elias tossed another stick into the fire. Sparks leapt. Because I stopped being the kind of man who wanted to be followed. Marrow wiped the blade. And now? Now I have someone to find. So do they. He nodded. That's what scares me. At sunrise, they followed the slope east. The trail twisted through old mines and into abandoned logging camps. They passed wreckage, broken wagons, snapped rail lines, scorched tools left like offerings to fire gods long dead. And then they found the second mark, painted in soot on the door of an old cabin, a crescent inside a circle. Marrow hissed through her teeth. That symbol, that was the rival mark, wasn't it? From back in the day. Elias nodded slowly. The crescent root. I thought. They were wiped out. So did we. Inside the cabin, they found blood. Not fresh, but not old enough to forget. Signs of a struggle, boot prints, a broken chair, a torn sleeve near the hearth. And in the corner, scrawled into the wall with a nail. He watched me burn. Marrow swallowed. Dell? Could be someone else. Elias stepped outside. Scanned the ground. Marrow followed. Why would she leave messages instead of tracks? Because someone taught her to hide her feet but not her fire. They followed the ash line deeper into the woods. By midday, they reached a fork. 2 trails, one wide and well-traveled. Horseshoe prints pressed deep into the dirt. The other narrow, barely visible. A line of broken branches and upturned stones. Elias crouched, picked up a snapped twig. Marrow pointed to the prints. Which way? She'd know better than to take the open trail. But so would they. Marrow scanned the horizon. So either she doubled back, or she wants someone to follow the wrong trail. Elias turned to the faint path. Spotted a strand of red thread caught on a pine needle. He plucked it. This way. The narrow trail curved into an old hunter's gorge. There were traps here. Not fresh, but deliberate, rusted snare lines. Pitfalls disguised beneath bark. Old signs of survival. Marrow crouched to disarm one. She's buying time, or sending a message. Which? Elias stood. That she learned from the best. At dusk, they reached the fire line, a shallow clearing. Charred trees. The smell of oil. A single boot print at the center. Small. Recent. And facing west. She lit the ground to keep them back, Elias said. Used oil and powder. Burned the barrier. Marrow rubbed ash between her fingers. Smart, but desperate. They're close. They moved on. 2 hours later, they found the fire, still warm. Abandoned. And next to it, a journal, wrapped in oilskin. Elias opened it. 3 pages, all blank. Except the last, where 4 words waited. North Fork. Before dusk. Marrow read it over his shoulder. Trap. Test. How do you know? Because it's in Marin's hand. She blinked. You said she was dead. I said I thought so. Elias tucked the journal away. Let's ride. The trail to North Fork was cut from bone. That's what Marrow said when the first buzzard started circling overhead. The phrase came to Elias like a whisper from another life. One of the old code phrases they used when things turned worse than expected, when plans no longer mattered. When you stopped tracking prints and started counting the dead, they crested the ridge an hour before dusk, and the valley opened beneath them like a mouth, scorched earth. 4 wagons turned on their sides, ash still curling in the grass, 2 horses dead. 1 man slumped near a wheel, arms out, body half-dashed charred. Merrill dismounted first. Rifle in hand, Elias followed. Slower, they moved from corpse to corpse. 8 bodies, none of them hers, none of them Marin, none of them Dell. That was worse. The girl had been here. They could see it in the footprints. Smaller stride, running, then skidding to a stop near one of the downed wagons. More blood there, but no body. They took her, Marrow said. Not just her, Elias replied. This many dead, someone fought back. Hard. He crouched near the largest pool of blood, touched the ground. Still sticky. Recent. You think she did this? Elias stood. If she's Marin's daughter, then she did exactly this. Marrow didn't ask more. They worked in silence, circling the edge of the carnage. Marrow kicked over a blackened shield. Beneath it, the mark again, ring of thorns, but this time burned over with a slash. That means something to you? Elias nodded. It means someone wants me to know the band is broken. They followed the survivors out west, through sharp brush, over creek beds that hadn't seen water in years. 2 days. No fire, no rest. They caught up on the 3rd morning. With the girl. Not with Marin, but with the ones who had taken them. There were 6, camped, near a spring. 2 on guard, 3 eating. 1 pacing. The pacing man wore a silver ring, not a band mark. A marshal's sigil. Worn smooth, Elias lay flat on the ridge above. Watching, Marrow passed him the spyglass. He focused on the horses. 2 extra mounts, lightweight, fast. You think one of them is hers? Marrow watched the man pacing. He's military. No, Elias said. He's worse. He used to be military. They waited until dusk. Then struck. It wasn't clean. The first guard spotted movement, shouted, drew too slow. Marrow silenced him. The second tried to run. Elias let him. They dropped into the camp. Fast. Marrow took the left. Elias the fire pit. The pacing man didn't reach for a weapon. He just smiled. Took you long enough. Elias leveled the barrel at him. Where is she? Depends. Which one are you looking for? Elias stepped closer. Don't play games. Not a game, the man said. It's a map. He dropped something onto the dirt. A locket. Elias picked it up. Marin single quotes S. But the photo inside, not of her. Of a girl. Dark hair, fierce eyes. Kala. He froze. You recognize her, the man said softly. Marrow stepped in, blood on her sleeve. Elias? But he didn't move. You see, the man continued. Marin's girl was taken. But the one you raised? The one who learned how to work iron in silence? She left a bigger trail than anyone else. Elias dropped the locket. Why show me this? Because the girl you think you're chasing isn't the one they want. They want Kala. They want the Smith's fire. Elias stepped forward and punched him. Hard. Blood sprayed. The man dropped. Marrow looked at him. You all right? Elias breathed heavy. No. He looked at the fallen man. Tie him. We ride. Where? Back. To Whispering Hollow? He looked west. Home. They rode through the night. No words. The horses knew the trail. Their hooves pounded familiar rhythm into dirt that hadn't seen Elias's shadow in days. Marrow rode behind, glancing over her shoulder every mile or so, eyes sharp for more than just pursuit. Because if what the man said was true, if Kala was the one they were really after, then Elias had made the one mistake he promised. Himself he never would. He'd left her unguarded. Whispering Hollow didn't feel the same. When they crossed into town just before sunrise, there was no smoke from the forge. No dog barking. No boots scraping plank. Too quiet. Marrow slowed her horse. Elias didn't. He rode straight through, straight for the smithy. The door was open, not broken. Just open. He dismounted before the horse had fully stopped, boots hitting the earth with a sharp crack. The air smelled of cooled iron and something fainter, burnt leather. He burst through the shop. Empty, tools still hanging, coals cold. Kala's apron on the wall. No blood. No body, but absence rang louder than screams. Marrow joined him inside. She left, voluntarily. How do you know? No scuffle, no signs of force, floors clean. Boots missing from the rack. That bundle there? She packed it herself. Elias crossed to the workbench. Something was missing. The striker. She'd taken it. His chest tightened. She didn't run. She prepared. Marrow picked up a folded paper from the table. No envelope, just a note, scrawled in hurried script. Don't follow me. You taught me how to finish a job. I'm doing that now. I'll burn if I have to. It wasn't signed. Didn't need to be. Elias folded the note, tucked it into his coat. How long ago? Marrow crouched by the door, ran 2 fingers across the hinge. Dust lines thin, not more than a day, half a day if she moved fast. Elias turned to her. She wouldn't go blind. She'd chase a trail. Same one we followed? Same one we led them away from, Marrow nodded. Then she's not running. She's hunting. They didn't rest. They turned the horses and followed the same line back toward North Fork, only faster. The tracks were clearer, now fresh boot prints over old ones. Smaller steps, straighter line. Kala had a purpose, which meant she had a plan. Elias tried to remember every lesson he'd taught her. Every scar on her hands, every time she watched the edge of a blade instead of the one swinging it. Marrow rode slightly ahead, rifle across her back. They crossed the ravine by nightfall, and that's when they found the first sign, a man, hung upside down by the ankles, dangling from a twisted pine, still breathing. Barely. Elias recognized him, one of the men from the first ambush. Marrow cut him down. He hit the ground with a groan. Elias knelt beside him. Where is she? The man coughed blood. You think she's still yours? Elias leaned closer. No, I think she's better than I ever was, the man spat. Then you know she's walking into fire. She was born in it. They rode hard. By the next dawn, they reached the edge of Burnt Creek. There, carved into the old wood post by the river crossing, was the ring of thorns, but now it had a line through it. Not slashed, marked, deliberate. She's challenging them, Marrow muttered. She's declaring war. A single track led west. They followed. The next outpost they came to was in ruins. 6 men dead. 1 woman, eyes open, hands tied, throat cut. Elias checked her boots. Not Kala, but she had a mark, ring of thorns, burned into the underside of her wrist. Marrow looked at him. What does that mean? Recruit, initiate, of the Hollow Band? No, Elias said quietly. Of whatever Kala's building. Now. They kept riding. They found the trail by the scent. First. Iron, blood, fire. They climbed a bluff near Ridgepoint. And saw the flames. A camp, lit with torches, dozens of riders, flags, armored wagons, all circled like teeth. And at the center bound to a pole Marin still alive, eyes closed, mouth bruised, chest rising. Elias clenched his fists. It's bait. Marrow scanned the hills. For Kala? For both of us. He looked beyond the fire. To a ridge just beyond the camp. There. A figure. Still. Silent. Watching. Kala. Elias exhaled. She's already here. Marrow loaded her rifle. Then what do we do? Elias looked toward the valley below. The storm of men. Quiet fire of the one he raised. He answered without hesitation. We give her the spark. And they descended into the blaze. They descended like a slow storm. Marrow took the left flank, disappearing into the timberline like smoke through branches. Elias stayed high, scoping the terrain with old eyes made young by fury. His limbs ached, but not from the ride. He could see the fire pit now. Could see Marin. Could see the bastards around her. And Calla motionless on the ridgeline, still as carved obsidian. They had her mother in a ring of flame. But Elias knew something. The others didn't. Fire didn't scare Calla. It was her native tongue. The sentries were lazy, comfortable. They assumed the storm had passed. One leaned against a broken cart axle, eating dried meat and watching the smoke curl. Elias dropped him. With a rock. No sound. Just a grunt and a thud. Another moved toward the noise. Elias slipped behind him, broke his knee. Then the silence. Merrow's rifle barked once from the woods. Then again. Then chaos, shouts, steel, sparks. Calla didn't move. She waited. Watched. Elias made it to the edge of the circle. 5 men around. Marin now, shields raised, eyes outward. "I see you, Thorn," one of them shouted. The voice was thick with arrogance. "Not fear, we've got the fire. You come close, we'll put it out." Elias stepped into the light. His coat was scorched from riding, his face blackened from the mines. But his eyes, those were something else entirely. Old, focused. Unforgiving. He said one word, "No." Then tossed the striker, straight into the woodpile behind them. A spark, that's all it took. Calla moved. She came down the ridge like a ghost of her own making. Not running. Walking. Straight-backed. Hood pulled low. The striker she carried glinted once in the firelight. The same one Elias gave her on her 15th birthday. She walked past the screams, past the gunfire, straight into the ring. The guards raised weapons. She raised her hand, and they burned. Oil powder. Traps she'd laid 2 nights ago. Knowing the trail would lead here. Knowing they'd circle Marin. Like carrion. The ground erupted. 3 went down screaming. 1 ran. 1 stood his ground. Foolishly. Calla stepped close, took his knife, and let him fall without a sound. Marin blinked. Awake. Coughed. Looked up, and saw her. "You're not done yet," Calla said. She cut the ropes. Marin slumped. Elias reached them then, dropped to one knee. Lifted Marin gently. "You always had the worst timing," she muttered. "You always had the worst ideas." Marrow appeared behind them, rifle smoking. "More coming, east trail, 7 maybe." Calla nodded. "I rigged the bridge." "You what?" Elias asked. She pointed. In the distance. A low rumble. Then dust. Then flame. The bridge collapsed, cutting off the reinforcements. Marrow let out a low whistle. "Well, damn." Calla handed Elias a map. "I found their camp." "Real one. Past Hollow Ridge. They're stockpiling gear. Men. Planning something bigger. What do they want? Not me, not just Marin. They want the band, the myth of it. They're trying to raise a ghost and use it to burn every town that ever said no to power." Elias read the lines, the circles, the sigil she'd marked in blood and ash. He looked at her. Really looked. "You started something," Calla nodded. "You always said heat makes the metal remember its shape," he smiled. "A rare thing. Guess I did." Behind them, the camp burned. Above them, the ridge turned red with morning. Calla looked back once, then turned west. "We have work to do." They followed her, because she wasn't the girl anymore. She was the forge, and the fire had only just begun. The map Calla gave them wasn't drawn on parchment or paper. It was sketched on leather burned in with a hot brand, the edges curled from heat, smelling faintly of ash and rust. Elias ran his thumb along a ridge mark inked with blood. Marrow leaned over his shoulder. "That camp past Hollow Ridge? You think it's where they keep the rest?" Calla answered without turning. "It's where they keep the future." She walked ahead, boots cutting a line through soft pine soil. No hesitation, no fear. 3 days' ride. And the land turned cruel. The forest thinned. Mountains rose like old teeth, gray and broken. and the silence deepened. Not quiet. Empty. Marrow whispered to Elias as they passed a canyon wall streaked with black soot. Someone burned this place. He nodded. A long time ago. A warning. They passed bone piles. Faded signs. The remnants of homesteads long erased by flame and memory. Calla didn't stop. Not until the ridge. There, she knelt. Fingers to dirt. Eyes closed. Marrow watched her. "What's she doing?" "Listening," Elias said. Calla opened her eyes. "They're moving, fast, east. Not just supplies, recruits." "How can you?" "Because I taught them how to hide. I know when they fail." Elias studied her face. Saw the faint tremble in her jaw. She wasn't afraid. She was mourning. "They took Smith's code," she said softly. "Twisted it. Used it to teach. Obedience instead of resilience." Marrow asked, "Then what's the plan?" Calla stood. "We cut the head." They moved by night. By day, they rested in hollows and shadows, following smoke plumes and boot trails. On the fifth dusk, they found the ridge, and below it, a city of tents. Not a camp. A fortress of canvas and metal and men. Black flags. Crimson. Thorns. Brass horns echoing drills across the valley. Calla lay flat against the overlook, Marrow beside her. Elias crouched higher. Marrow muttered, "Looks like they've been digging in for weeks." Elias scanned the layout. Too clean. Too symmetrical. Calla said, "They're preparing for something ceremonial." "What kind of ceremony needs that many guns?" She pointed to a stage. At the center of the camp. Upon it, a forge. Elias exhaled slowly. "They're going to reforge the band." Marrow blinked. "But it's broken." "That's the point," Calla said. "They want to rebrand it. Not honor what it was, but use its legend as a leash." She looked at Elias. "They'll burn the last of the old ways, then raise something new in its place." Marrow asked, "And we're just 3. Calla smiled. "Then we'll have to be more than that." That night, they split. Marrow moved west into the supply lanes. Elias circled north, toward the signal tower. Calla crept down the ridge alone, toward the tented forge. Each step rehearsed. Each breath measured. She moved like memory. Like fire. In the wind. Past the first guards. Past the second ring, until she stood beneath the banner. The forge was cold, but the fuel lay ready. Stacks of wood. Barrels of oil. Buckets of coal. A single hammer rested on an anvil, untouched. Waiting. She touched it. It was lighter than the one her father used. Weaker. She turned. A man stood in the dark. Tall, gray hair tied back. Cloak stiff with blood, salt, and rank. He didn't flinch, didn't draw, just spoke. "You came." Calla stepped back. "So did you. They think you're the key. They're wrong." "Are they?" He stepped into the light. Face burned on one side, eye milky. But the other eye, that one burned. "You're the legacy. I'm the reckoning." He laughed. "Then swing." She didn't hesitate. The hammer hit hard. But he caught it. Barehanded. The iron sizzled. He didn't scream. "You'll need more than that." Calla stepped in. Dropped the hammer, drew a knife. He blocked. Countered. She rolled. Slashed. Blood. He grunted. "But didn't fall. I made Elias. You ruined him." He smiled, teeth red. "Then what does that make you?" Calla pressed the blade to his neck, whispered, "The forge," and twisted. The blade slipped clean. Calla stepped back as the man crumpled to his knees, gasping, both hands clasped around the wound at his throat. He didn't fall right away. He fought it like pride could stitch flesh, like arrogance could hold blood. But gravity doesn't lie. He fell, and the forge behind him came alive. It wasn't fire. She started. It was memory. Calla dropped the knife and picked up the striker. The same tool Elias had once gifted her when her hands were still calloused with innocence and soot. She struck the anvil once hard. The ring echoed. In the tent, in the camp. Beyond the ridge, Elias heard it from the north line. Marrow froze in. The supply yard, her hands halfway through a crate of black powder. The sound wasn't just steel. It was signal. Kala was telling them the forge had been claimed. She was telling them the past wasn't theirs to rewrite. Within minutes, the camp descended into panic. Men shouted. One ran past Elias's hiding spot, mumbling something about the ghost girl with fire in her mouth. He waited, listened, watched torches light the central square. That's when he saw them. Not soldiers, not bandits, but the children of what the Hollow Band had once promised: orphans, drifters, disillusioned folk lured into uniform by the idea of power and purpose. They were scared, not just of Kala, of what she represented. He moved. Elias made it into the signal tent, just as one of the lieutenants was reaching for the flare. Cannon. He didn't hesitate. 2 shots, clean, fast. The flare misfired, arcing into the sky with a spiral of green sparks. Marrow saw it from the yard. Idiot. Wrong. Color. She yanked the fuse from the crate, set the powder trail, lit it, then ran. Behind her, the supply depot exploded. The noise shattered the illusion of order. Kala remained at the forge. Hammer raised. Not to strike steel, but to hold the line. They came at her in waves, first 2, then 4. She fought like her father had taught, with precision, with restraint. And when restraint failed, with fire. She wasn't there to win. She was there to remind. Every strike said, "You do not own this legacy." Every breath she took beneath the banners sighed, "You cannot forge loyalty through fear." Every enemy she dropped whispered, "You can burn down a house, but not a hearth." By the time Elias reached her, the square was littered with broken bodies and burning flags. He saw her, backlit by fire, and he didn't speak. He just stood beside her. Marrow appeared next, blood on her temple, a trail of smoke. Following her boots, she fell to one knee, then rose again. "That it?" Kala shook her head. "There's still the Forge Master. The one who replaced the Hollow Band's name with this." "Lie." Elias scanned the chaos. "Where is he?" Kala turned, lifted the hammer. Pointed. To the cathedral tent. At the far end of camp. Beyond the dead, behind guards, above them all. They walked together, 3 of them, past soldiers who didn't raise rifles, past recruits who sat trembling behind crates, through smoke and silence, until they reached the threshold. The tent was high-ceilinged, ribbed with iron. Inside, silence, then a voice, "You don't look like much." Kala stepped forward. "Neither did you once." The man behind the table wore no armor. His hands were soft, his robes ceremonial. A book lay open. Inside, the old symbols. Band sigils, twisted, distorted. "You've come to kill me?" "No," she said. "I've come to end you." He sneered. "You think burning a camp stops a movement?" Kala shook her head. "Fire doesn't stop a movement. It reveals it. And this isn't a movement. It's a parasite." He reached for a bell. Marrow shouted. It exploded in his hand. He screamed. Elias stepped closer. "This was never about you. You think people will follow your girl just because she swings a hammer?" Elias leaned in. "No, they'll follow her because she doesn't need to." Kala walked forward, took the book, dropped it into the fire pit, watched it curl and blacken. Then she turned, left the man sobbing, left the symbols in ash. Left the forge intact, because some flames were meant to stay burning. They buried the dead with bare hands. No ceremony. No prayer. Only dirt. Kala worked quietly, sleeves rolled, blood drying in flakes on her collar. Marrow dug beside her. Elias hauled bodies, not stopping to ask whose side they were on. There weren't sides anymore. Only choices, only consequences. The sun broke red through the clouds by the time the last grave was covered. Shallow. Too many. But enough to let the earth begin again. Elias tossed the last spade of dust, wiped his brow, and looked. At the field of mounds, Calla stood at the edge, arms folded. Not in grief, in thought. Marrow stepped beside her. You did it. Calla didn't look at her. Not yet. We burned their doctrine. Dismantled their camp. Took out their leader. That was one nest. There's others. Elias said, Then you mean to? Keep going. She nodded. You're sure? Calla turned finally. You always said the forge doesn't choose what it tempers. Only how. Elias smiled faintly. That does sound like me. It was. I remember, even if you forget. He laughed under his breath. Marrow. Crossed her arms. What's next? We go south, through Dust Valley. There's a convoy that hasn't picked a side yet. If we don't reach them, someone else will. And if they don't listen? Calla picked up her hammer. Then they'll learn to. Dust Valley wasn't named for the sand. It was named for the bones. The wind that passed through carried more than grit. It carried the silence of promises broken 100 years ago, when the band had first fallen apart and left towns exposed to warlords and fire priests. The convoy was camped between two ridges, dozens of wagons, mercs, hired guards, miners, traders, folk who didn't trust borders. When Calla approached, they raised rifles. Marrow didn't flinch. Elias stepped ahead. We're not selling. We're not stealing. We're asking for 10 minutes. The man with the brass eyepiece tilted his head. Why? Calla raised her hand. No weapon, just the old band mark burned into her glove. Because you're about to be asked by someone else. And you need to know what that answer means. They let them in. The meeting happened around a fire made from broken crates and old legislation scrolls. The brass eye leader called himself Shale. He looked like a man who'd lived 2 lives in one. You're the Smith's girl? Calla nodded. You've been burning camps. We've been exposing them. Same difference. Marrow leaned forward. They'll come for you next. Shale gestured to his guards. They already have. 2 riders yesterday. Tried to offer coin. When that failed, they mentioned fire. Elias said, and I buried them under salt. Calla's eyes met his. Then you already made your choice. Shale looked away. I made a choice. But my people, they need more than fire and pride. They need something to believe in. So give them the truth. And what truth is that? Calla stood, walked to the center of the firelight. That we don't owe fealty to symbols. That legacy isn't loyalty. That forging something new doesn't mean forgetting what was good. She raised her hammer, not in threat, in promise. We are not the hollow band. We are not its ashes. We are its reckoning. The crowd was silent. Then one woman stepped forward. Courier, maybe 16. She dropped a satchel. Pulled back her sleeve. The band mark. Burned halfway. Unfinished. She held out her arm. Finish it. Calla hesitated. Elias stepped beside her. She's asking you to lead. Calla took the girl's arm, lifted her, own striker, and pressed it gently to the flesh. The girl didn't scream, only closed her eyes. When it was done, the mark was whole. Calla said nothing. She didn't have to. They came forward, one by one. Not to kneel, but to stand, beside her. By dawn, the convoy had changed direction. No longer running, now moving with purpose. Calla rode at the front. Elias beside her. Marrow behind. The wind picked up, carried ash, carried hope. Somewhere ahead, another fire waited, but this time, it would burn on their terms. Calla looked east, toward the mountains, toward the memory of a name long stolen, and whispered, "Let them come. We're ready now." They didn't ride fast, they rode steady, and when the wind shifted westward and carried the scent of coal smoke, Calla didn't flinch. She simply adjusted the strap on her shoulder, tightened the loop around her hammer, and leaned forward slightly, urging the horse on. Elias noticed. You recognize that burn? Same one they used in Cold Bend, crude coal. No oil, recruitment outpost. Maybe, or a forge, a false one. Marrow pulled her horse closer. How close are we to the frontier line? Kala said, too close. They reached a bluff by midday. From there, they saw the outpost, not a town. Not quite, a string of makeshift buildings built into the cliffside, fire pits, blacksmith smoke. Flags painted with sigils assorted from the old band, and people. Dozens of them. Moving like they were told how to walk. Kala's jaw tightened. Elias squinted. That's not a camp. It's a forge school. Marrow swore under her breath. They're not training soldiers. They're rewriting memory. Kala nodded. We go in tonight. Guns blazing? No. Eyes open. Night fell without fanfare. The sky dimmed like a curtain drawing, revealing stars too ashamed to shine bright. Kala crept through the southern ravine. Elias and Marrow split north. No torches, no whistles. Just breath and instinct. Kala reached the wall by midnight. Found the hole in the fencing, a deliberate break. Like someone wanted her to see it. She slipped through. And then paused. Because in the yard stood a girl. No older than 12. Hammer in hand, face streaked with soot. Kala froze. The girl looked up. Then down, then back again. You're her, aren't you? Kala swallowed. Depends. Who do you think I am? The one who didn't bow. The one they curse but still study. The one who broke the ring. Kala stepped closer. The girl didn't flinch. What's your name? I used to be called Tansy. Now they call me Flare. Kala exhaled. Tansy's a good name. They said it was weak. Kala knelt. Then they're scared of what's strong about it. Tansy looked past her. They'll come soon. They always patrol after midnight. Do they know you're out here? No, I used to believe them. Until I found the old books. Where? Tansy pointed to a broken wagon by the storehouse. In the lining, someone hid them. Maybe they wanted someone like me to find them. Kala stood. Then let's make sure more do. Elias reached the bell tower first. 2 guards, both green. Both distracted. He moved like a shadow, cracked one in the windpipe, broke the other's leg. No screams. Marrow was already in the signal house. This place is crawling with indoctrination scripts. They're using old band texts, spent out of shape. Elias flipped through one. They changed the names. Reversed meanings. Made resilience sound like obedience. Marrow pulled a bundle of fuses. I'm done here. Elias nodded. Good. The forge burns at dawn. Back in the yard, Kala led Tansy to the wagon. Opened the lining. Inside. Books. Letters. Maps. Real ones. Tansy whispered. Do you think they knew they'd be found? Maybe not. Maybe they just hoped. Kala gathered the items, handed some to Tansy. Go east. There's a convoy riding the ridge. Tell them the truth. Use your real name. Will I see you again? Kala touched her shoulder. If I do this right, you won't need to. Tansy ran. The sky shifted pale when the first bell rang. The instructors lined up the children. Drills, recitations, reforging oaths. Until Kala stepped into the square. No disguise. No hesitation. Just the truth in her stance. One instructor stepped forward. Sneered. Double quotes you. Me. You shouldn't be here. Neither should your lies. Elias walked out of the tower behind her. Marrow from the east yard. The children stared. The guards hesitated. Kala raised her voice. You've been fed history by those who fear it. Told strength looks one way. Taught to burn your names and wear theirs. She unrolled a banner. The original band mark. Pure. Unbroken. Double quotes. This is what they tried to erase. But you can't unmake memory. You can only try to bury it. And I'm here to dig it back up. The forge pit roared. Someone lit it. One child stepped forward, then another, then dozens. The guards didn't shoot. They lowered rifles. Some dropped them. Kala walked into the crowd, lifted the hammer, let the fire speak. The forge screamed. Steel met flame like it remembered its purpose. Calla moved through the firelight, each swing of her hammer not toward weaponry, but truth. Symbols reclaimed. Plates reshaped. The old mark restamped on fresh iron. It wasn't ceremony. It was correction. Children gathered. Not to be trained, but to learn. To ask. To unlearn. Elias stood watch at the edge of the square, Marrow guarding the far ridge, scanning for dust trails, signs of an approaching retaliation. But for the moment, there was peace, a different kind. Of silence. Earned. Not imposed. By noon, the first caravan arrived, not enemy. Allies. Led by Tansy. She rode a tired horse, eyes rimmed red but burning bright. Behind her, riders bearing mismatched gear, freed scouts, fringe traders, and a few old smiths who still bore the scars of the first fires. Calla met them at the gate. Tansy slid down. I told them what she said. I used my real name. Calla smiled. Then you're already leading. Tansy looked down. Some still think I'm too young. So did I once. That night, the forge burned bright enough to be seen from the cliffs. They weren't hiding. That was the point. The next morning, smoke signaled movement. Elias spotted it first. Riders, 2 groups, splitting east and west, recon units. Marrow cursed. They're triangulating. Calla nodded. They know we've reclaimed a stronghold. They'll test the edges, then strike. How long do we have? Maybe a day. Enough to run? Enough to prepare. They didn't dig trenches. They built truths. Old sigils were carved into the walls. Memories were passed like weapons. One smith reforged chains into shields. A young girl etched names of lost villages into scrap metal and handed them out like talismans. Calla walked the line, gave no orders, asked only one question. What do you want to protect? Answers varied. A sister. A story. A place where no one had to forget who they were. She wrote each on the wall of the forge. In cold. Then flame. When the first rider crested the hill, they didn't charge. They watched. Spied. Took note of the banners. Then left. Elias watched them vanish. Scouts will report. Main force likely a day behind. Marrow finished wiring the eastern hill. What's the plan? Calla said, we don't stop them. We outlive them. At dawn, drums. Distant. Slow. A cadence of warning. The enemy marched with order. Red armor. False banners. Disciples of the twisted forge movement. Masked and militant. They expected submission. They found a wall of reclaimed steel, and a girl standing in front of it. Calla didn't raise her weapon. She raised her voice. You want to burn the old world? Then look at who remembers it. Children stood with her, elders beside them, and smiths who'd once fled now returned to hold the line. You want obedience. We offer memory. The enemy commander stepped forward. You'll be ash by night. Calla met his eyes. Then we'll be stars by morning. The battle wasn't chaos. It was rhythm. Each defense a heartbeat. Each counterstrike a memory restored. Marrow lit the eastern trap. Fire swallowed their flank. Elias led a group through the west ravine, cutting their rear. Calla held the center. Not just with her hammer, but with her presence. She didn't shout. She didn't run. She stood, and people stood taller beside her. They held all day. Until dusk, when the drums faded and only breath remained. They didn't celebrate. They rebuilt. Not because they had to, because they wanted to, because now they could. And at the center of it all, the forge, still burning, still alive. Calla looked at the ash-covered yard, the bent metal, the broken weapons turned into fences. She didn't speak. She listened. The wind no longer carried commands, only stories. The next morning, the forge rang with the sound of repair. Not defense. Not retreat. Renewal. Calla stood beside the main bellows. Sleeves rolled, sweat streaking soot down her cheeks. She hadn't slept. No one had. But no one complained. Elias rewrapped a young boy's hand in clean cloth after a burn. Too fast, he said gently. Iron teaches by hurting first. The boy nodded. Kala turned from the flames. Keep the rhythm slow. You don't shape truth with haste. She caught Elias's eyes. He gave a tired nod. Marrow stood at the edge of the encampment. Watching. Waiting. She felt it before she saw it. The kind of stillness before a new storm. Not the enemy, something else. Something bigger than flags or armies. History moving beneath the skin. They came by noon. Not soldiers, not scouts, caravans. Wagons piled with books, broken heirlooms, band-marked relics from 100 towns forgotten by maps. At first just 2. Then 4. Then dozens. At their head rode a woman in bone-beaded armor. She stopped in front of the forge. Dismounted. Removed her gloves. Kala stepped forward. You rode far. The woman nodded. And you lit the fire. Kala said nothing. The woman reached into her saddlebag, pulled out a blackened piece of iron, curved, etched with flames. This belonged to my father. He wore it when they burned our home. I kept it hidden, because I was told memory was dangerous. She handed it to Kala. Now I want it reforged. Kala turned the metal over in her palm. Not replaced? No, I want its scars kept. Kala looked up. Then we begin. For 2 days the forge burned without pause. Not to make weapons. To reforge memory. Each relic restored. Each story retold. Each mark recarved with care. Children watched. Elders added their hands. Songs were sung not from hymn books, but from breath passed down across generations. Elias helped catalog. Marrow drilled the new defenders. And Kala? She became something more than a symbol. She became a rhythm. The steady beat in the center of it all. On the 3rd night, a child approached the fire. A girl with ink on her hands and a blade at her hip, too big for her height. They said you slept behind Smith. Kala, polishing the bent crest, looked up. I did. Was it scary? Sometimes. Did you know you'd do this one day? Kala thought. No, but I knew I couldn't unsee what I saw. Couldn't forget what he taught. The girl nodded, sat down beside her. They say you don't sleep now either. Kala smiled. I dream while I'm awake. Is that better? Kala glanced at the forge. It's louder. That same night, Elias pulled Marrow aside. It's spreading. Too fast. The movement? The myth? Marrow frowned. You worried it'll turn into what we just destroyed. Yes, without grounding, even truth becomes weaponized. Marrow looked back at Kala, surrounded by faces, flames dancing in her eyes. So what do we do? Elias said. Remind her, when needed, that she's not a legend, she's a person. Marrow grinned. That's the easy part. At dawn, a new scout arrived. He bore no weapons, only a scroll. Kala opened it. Inside, a summons from the remaining seats of the Forge Council. An invitation. Or a trap. Elias raised over her shoulder. They're calling a conclave. First in 20 years, Marrow whistled. So they finally took notice. Kala folded the scroll. They want me to come alone. Elias raised an eyebrow. And will you? She tucked the scroll into her belt. Yes, but I won't walk in. Then how? Kala looked to the sky. I'll ride, and I won't ride low. I want them to see me coming. By nightfall, her horse was ready. Black, swift, marked with the band's reborn sigil. Tansy helped lace the saddle. Will they listen? They'll have to. And if they don't? Kala looked back at the forge. Then they'll hear the hammer. She rode out just before the moon crested. Alone. But not unsupported. Every fire behind her. Every name whispered in her wake. The stars lit her path, and she didn't look back. The Forge Council's seat rose from the canyon floor like a buried blade. Half-buried stone towers. Brass piping along the ribs of the cliffs. Steam vents coughed irregularly into the morning air, as if the mountain itself objected to the assembly. Convening within it, Kala arrived by the western gate. No one greeted her. She tied her horse, stepped down, and adjusted the hammer slung across her back. The eyes came next. Dozens. Above, behind narrow slits in the walls, behind reinforced glass, observers. Judging, measuring. She walked past them like smoke. The central chamber was colder than she expected, lit by a ring of molten glass embedded in the ceiling. The floor below was etched with the symbols of the original bands, every forged tribe that had once stood for independence and identity, and every one of them fractured. Kala stepped into the center. The 13 remaining council members sat above her in a ring, elevated, robed, none in Smith's garb. She didn't bow, didn't speak. Let silence do what words couldn't. Eventually, one of them, a man with white braids and a bronze ring across his chest, leaned forward. Kala of the old forge, she nodded. You come armed, only with what you let be taken. You led an unauthorized campaign, burned training grounds, interfered with independent conclaves. I interrupted indoctrination. I answered silence. Another counselor, a woman with a band of blue glass across her eyes, raised her voice. You're stoking rebellion. Kala looked up. Then maybe it deserved to burn, murmurs rippled. But the man with the bronze ring remained still. We did not summon you for theatrics. We summoned you for accounting. Kala stepped forward. Then count this. Every child who forgot their family name because you branded them with doctrine. Every town that spoke your creeds out of fear. Every smith forced to shape symbols instead of tools. He frowned. This council maintained stability. You preserved control. Another voice from the shadows. And what would you have us do? Return to chaos? Return to choice. A third counselor, this one younger, cleared his throat. The fires you've lit are spreading. That is undeniable, but chaos travels with them. Not all flames cleanse. Kala stepped closer. And yet here you sit, protected by the flames of others, critiquing the fire you refuse to tend. He leaned forward. So what is it you want? Kala let the question breathe, then said, recognition, not of me, of the movement. Of what you let rot, and what's being reforged. Silence. Then, you ask us to relinquish control. No, I ask you to remember why you were given it. The council whispered. Argued. Disappeared behind chamber doors. Kala waited, alone beneath the ringed glass light. Her shadow looked like Smith's. Hours passed. When they returned, the air was different. Colder. Resolved. The man with the bronze ring stood. We have reached consensus. Kala lifted her chin. You will not be named leader. Good. I didn't ask to be. But you will be acknowledged. The forges you've lit will be granted autonomous designation, a new branch, unaligned, monitored. Then they'll burn free. The woman with the glass band added, you will be expected to attend annual conclaves. Kala nodded. I'll bring a hammer, not words. We trust you will know when to use which. When she left the chamber, the halls were not empty. Young smiths waited. Apprentices, historians, ghosts of a story they no longer feared to tell. They didn't cheer. They walked beside her. Out into the morning sun. Where Tansy stood, holding a bundle of letters. From the south, she said. New camps want to join. One near the salt flats, another in the thorn spires. Kala took the papers. How's the forge? Still burning. Then we keep going. They didn't ride for war, they rode for truth. And when others joined, when the scattered heat of buried forges sparked across the continent, it wasn't rebellion. It was memory, breathing, and the hammer didn't fall to strike. It rose. To build. The desert had changed. What once was barren now bore the marks of movement, wheels in the dust. Footprints that didn't wander, they connected. Between places that used to be forgotten, used to be broken. Kala rode ahead of the convoy. The horizon shimmered like molten glass, but she didn't squint. She knew where she was going. The thorn spires rose crooked in the distance. A place avoided by traders and feared by mapmakers because no one controlled it. Not even the old bands dared claim it, but now a signal fire burned low in its base. A red-orange flicker against the slate rock, a call and a challenge. They camped. At the spire's edge, Elias laid out the gear, more cautious than usual. This place doesn't whisper like the others. It waits. Marrow smirked. You scared, old man? Just aware. Which is more than I can say for most who come here. Tansy was already drawing in the dirt. Map lines, guesswork. Rumors from old traders passed through back alleys. Calla sat beside her. You sure they're here? Tansy nodded. The Smiths, that. Never swore allegiance. They've been hiding here for years. But now they want to talk. Why now? Because something worse than silence is coming. At dawn they entered the spires, cliff walls pressed in. Paths narrowed. Shadows warped. Voices echoed without source. Until a shape stepped forward. Tall, scarred, wrapped in layered, metal and sand-dyed cloth. A forge mask hung at their hip. Which of you is the hammer? Calla didn't answer right away. She stepped forward. The figure studied her. You wear no sigil. Mine was burned off and remade. They turned, then follow. Their enclave wasn't a camp. It was a labyrinth, stone-carved halls, melted weaponry reforged into arches, forge powered by the breath of the earth itself, and people old and young none marked. Free. The leader, named Saren, brought her to a chamber lit by sunshaft and steam. Why? Come here? Because the council acknowledged the flame. But others still want it snuffed. Saren crossed arms. We survived by being forgotten. You threatened that. You reached out first. Because our children ask questions now. Questions your fire ignited. Calla laid her hammer on the stone table. Then let them ask, and let us answer together. Saren stared long, then nodded once. Tomorrow we hold conclave, our kind. No robes, no ranks, just flame and voice. That night, stories passed through the spires like wind. A girl sang of the broken crescent. An elder recited metal lore lost to the surface. Someone played a forge horn that hadn't been heard in 2 decades. Calla didn't speak much. She listened. And for the first time, truly heard how much had survived in secret. Tansy whispered beside her. They're not afraid of you. Should they? Be? No, but most are. Calla thought about that. Then said, Then I haven't failed. The conclave was held in a spiral chamber. Carved like a helix, each forge clan had a ring. But they didn't sit above. They sat equal. Saren opened with a flame. Ritual, no oaths, only light. Then gestured to Calla. Speak your purpose. Calla walked to the center. I don't come with decree. Only with memory. The fire we hold now isn't mine. It was Smith's and yours. And everyone who hid truth in iron so it wouldn't be erased in words. Murmurs. One. Voice called out. And what do you want from us? Not submission, contribution. Another. And if we refuse? Then your silence will be respected. But your history deserves a place at the fire. Saren stood. Let her hammer speak. Calla raised it slowly. And began to forge. Not weapons. Symbols. One. From each enclave, melded. Not overridden. Into a new seal. Not a crest. A promise. As she worked. Others joined. Tansy held tongs. A boy from Saren's forge cooled metal. Elias murmured. Verses of the old forged tongues to keep rhythm. When it was done, the seal bore 13 rings inside a single flame. Calla stepped back. No more doctrine. Only memory, only meaning. When the seal cooled, it did not shine. It pulsed. As if it remembered every mark made before it. Every hand that held flame not as a weapon, but as a warning. A guide, a burden. Calla stepped back from the anvil. Around her, no one clapped. Stood. And bowed. Not in obedience. In recognition. Saren approached. She didn't speak at first. Then she placed her own smithing gloves on the seal. Let this not be the end of memory. Let this be the hearth where it grows. Kala nodded. And may no one hold it alone. Word spread fast, faster than horses. Faster. Then councils. From thorn spires to the salt flats, from Cold Bend to the high ridges. Across shattered territories and muted towns, they came, not to fight. To witness fire that did not consume, but invited. The forge at Thorn. Spires became the first shared hall. No guards. No gate. But every wall held iron with a story etched into it. Visitors added their own. Children carved shapes beside elders. Traders brought steel, not for sale, but for shaping. Exiles returned, not for vengeance, but for voice. Kala moved through it all quietly, not above. Not central. Present. And listening. One day, a boy approached her, barely 8, dirt on his face. Eyes too wide for someone so small. He held out a rock. Flat, cracked, scarred. It used to be part of a wall they broke. I kept it, because it still held the mark. Kala took it gently. What mark? He pointed. The tiniest ring, barely visible beneath soot and scrape. Kala turned the rock in her palm. You want it cleaned? No. I want it kept, the way it is, so no one forgets it broke once. She nodded. Then we'll mount it by the gate. Elias built shelves that weren't for books, but for blades that would never be used again. Marrow taught. Every child had a guard without losing wonder. Tansy wrote the first ledger, not of laws, but of lessons. And Kala? She kept forging. Not just metal. But space. Space for people who didn't know. Where else to go. Space for those who remembered too. Much and were told to forget. Space for those who hadn't spoken their name. Aloud in years she didn't lead. She lit. And others carried the torch. On the anniversary of the first fire, they gathered at dusk. No speeches. Just flame. Each person placed something at the central pit. A piece of iron, a memory, a silence they were ready to break. Kala placed her hammer, not as an offering. As a symbol that the work could continue. With or without her. Later that night, Tansy found her sitting alone, looking at the stars. You ever think about going back? Kala didn't look away. To what? Before Smith, before all this. Kala was quiet for a while, then said, I think about who I was before someone believed I was more than what I'd been told. Tansy sat beside her. You think I'll be like you? I hope not. Why? Kala turned to her finally. Because I hope you'll be more. By morning, new riders arrived. They didn't ask permission. They brought stories, relics, languages Kala had never heard before. She welcomed them, then returned to the forge. The bellows waited, the steel listened, and the fire rose. Not to burn the past away, but to keep it alive.